Hello my dear students. Today we will talk about friction, and this lesson is for grade 5, unit 1, lesson 1. Previously we talked about different types of forces like gravity force, electromagnetic force, and today we will talk about a different type of force which is called friction. What is the meaning of friction force? It's the force exists between two surfaces when they touch each other and it affects in the opposite direction of the movement. Again, it's the force exists between two surfaces when they touch each other, and it affects in the opposite direction of the movement, which means that if the body was moving forward, means that the friction affects backward. So the friction always affects in the opposite direction of the movement. There are different types of friction, but before we talk about the types of friction, let's remember the states of matter. The matter has 3 states: solid, liquid, and gas. So the types of friction may be friction between solid objects if the two surfaces was solid. Friction between objects and air. One surface is solid and the other is air. A friction between objects and water. Solid object and water. So, the types of friction are 3 types. The first one, friction between solid objects. Number 2, friction between objects and air. Number 3, friction between objects and water. First, let's talk about friction between solid objects. Friction between solid objects means that the two surfaces that touch each other are solid. Like when you rub your hands together, your hands are solid. So the friction here is between solid objects. What are the factors that affect friction force? When we talk about the factors that affect friction force, it means what causes the friction force to increase or to decrease. First factor that affects the friction force is the surface area of the moving object. Again, the surface area of moving object. The second type or the second factor that affects the friction force is the type of the material surface. And the third factor is the speed of the body. And we will talk about each of them separately. So, the factors affecting friction force are 3 factors. The first one is the surface area of the moving object. The second one is the type of the material surface. The third one is the speed of the body. First, let's talk about the surface area of the moving object. The surface area means is the surface that touch the other surface is large or small and the rule is by increasing the surface area of moving object, the friction force increases and vice versa. Vice versa means that by decreasing surface area of moving object, the friction force decreases. So, by increasing surface area of the moving object, the friction force increases and vice versa. It means that if the two surfaces that touch each other are large, so the friction force will increase. And if the two surfaces that touch each other are small, so the friction force will decrease. This relation, we called it direct relation. Again, this relation is called direct relation. Direct relation means that when one thing increases, the other thing increases also. Again, direct relation means that by increasing one thing, another thing is increased, and by decreasing one thing, the other thing is decreased. So, this is called direct relation. So, we can say that there is a direct relation between the surface area of the moving object and the friction force, because by increasing the surface area, the friction force increases, and by decreasing surface area, the friction force decreases. And this relation, we call the direct relation. The second factor that affects the friction between solid objects is the type of the material surface. Again, the type of the material surface. The type of the material surface is this surface rough, smooth? The friction force increases between rough surfaces. If the two surfaces that touch each other were rough, so the friction force increases. And if the two surfaces that touch each other were smooth, the friction force decreases. So the friction force increases between rough surfaces and decreases between smooth surfaces. That's why the rubber ball moves on the classroom floor for longer distance than on playground. Why? Because the friction force increases between rough surfaces and decreases between smooth surfaces. And in this case, the classroom floor is smooth, so the friction will decrease. So there will be no factor that causes the rubber ball to stop. So the friction decreases and the rubber ball moves for a longer distance. But what about the playground? The playground is a rough surface. So the friction force decreases on the playground or on rough surfaces, so it will cause the object to stop. The third factor that affects friction force is the speed of the body. Again, the third factor that affects the friction force is the speed of the body. Like the surface area of the moving object, by increasing the speed of the body, the friction force increases, and by decreases the speed of the body, the friction force decreases. And we can describe it as also a direct relation. So there is a direct relation between the speed of a moving body and the friction force. By increasing the speed of the body, the friction force increases, and vice versa. It means that if the object was moving with high speed, the friction force will increase. And if the object was moving with low speed or very slowly, the friction force will decrease. So, about the friction between solid objects, I have three factors affecting the friction force. First of all, surface area of moving object, and we said that there is a direct relation between surface area and the friction force. By increasing surface area, the friction force increases, and by decreasing surface area, the friction force decreases. The second factor is the type of the material surface. We said that the friction force increases on rough surfaces and decreases between smooth surfaces. The third one is the speed of the body, and we said that there is a direct relation between the speed of the body and the friction force. By increasing the speed of the body, the friction force increases, and by decreasing the speed of the body, the friction force decreases. The friction between solid objects and air. It means that I have one surface which is solid and the other surface is the air, and we call it air resistance. So, when a solid object moves in air, a friction force arises between the object and the air. And this type of friction is called air resistance, and it also acts in the opposite direction of the body movement. So the friction force always affects in the opposite direction of the body movement. What is the meaning of air resistance? The friction force results from the movement of solid objects through air. Again, it's the friction force results from the movement of the solid objects through air. What are the factors that affect the air resistance? I have two factors only that affect air resistance. The first one is the speed or the velocity of the body, and the other one is the surface area of the body. And these two factors have direct relation with the friction force. Number one, the speed of the body. Also, by increasing the speed of the body that moves through air, the air resistance increases, and by decreasing the speed of the body that moves through air, the air resistance decreases. So this relation is called direct relation. Air resistance, it's a type of friction, so it also acts in the opposite direction of the body movement. So it resists its movement. I have here live application on this factor. I have here a very important note. When air resistance affecting a moving car equals the force that results from increase the speed of the car moves with a constant velocity. Velocity means speed. The second factor that affects friction force is the surface area. What is the meaning of surface area? We talked previously on the friction between solid objects, and we said that the surface area has a direct relation with the friction force. And the air resistance is a type of friction, so there is a direct relation between the surface area and the air resistance, which means that by increasing the surface area of the body that moves through air, the air resistance increases, and vice versa. Vice versa means that by decreasing the surface area of the body that moves through air, the air resistance decreases. The live application on this factor that rockets, aircraft, trains are designed in streamlined shapes to decrease air resistance. Again, rockets, aircraft, and trains are designed in streamlined shapes to decrease air resistance. Also, birds have streamlined shapes to decrease air resistance. Why do they need to decrease air resistance? The air resistance, it's a type of friction. It causes the object to slow down or stop. So, to make these things move, rockets, aircraft, trains, to make them move, we have to decrease the air resistance to be able to move. So how can we decrease their speed? By designing them in a streamlined shape to decrease air resistance, so the surface area decreases, so their speed increases. On the opposite way, the parachutist opens the parachute to land safely. Why? To increase the surface area, and so the air resistance increases, so their speed decreases, so they can land safely. The parachutist opens their parachute during landing. Why? To increase surface area, so the air resistance increases, so their speed decreases, so they will be able to land safely. The fourth life application is that birds stretch their wings on landing. Why? Also to increase the surface area, so the air resistance increases, so their speed decreases, so they can be able to land safely. So I have here a give reason question. Rockets, aircrafts are designed in streamlined shape. Why? To decrease air resistance. How can they decrease air resistance? By decreasing the surface area, so the air resistance decrease, so their speed increase. The third type of the friction force is the friction between solid objects and water, and this means that I have two surfaces. One of them is solid and the other one is water, and here I call this type of friction water resistance. When any object moves through water, like fish, like ship, a friction force arises between this object and water, and this type of friction is called water resistance. This type of friction is called water resistance. What is the meaning of water resistance? It's a friction force results from the movement of any object through water. Again, what is the meaning of water resistance? It's a friction force results from the movement of any object through water. And since that the water resistance is a type of friction, so it also affects on the opposite direction of the movement, and it causes the object to slow down and stop. The movement of the fish or dolphin is in the opposite direction of water resistance. The movement of swimmer is in the opposite direction of water resistance. The movement of the ship is in the opposite direction of water resistance. So, what are the factors that affect water resistance? I have two factors affecting water resistance. The first one is the speed of the body. The second one is the body surface area. So it's exactly like the air resistance. The first factor that affects water resistance is the speed of the body. Since that the water resistance is a type of friction and I have the speed of the body, so there is a direct relation between the speed of the body and the water resistance. And it means that by increasing the speed of the body through water, the water resistance increases, and vice versa. So, by increasing the speed of the body through water, the water resistance increases, and by decreasing the speed of the body through water, the water resistance decreases. The second factor that affects water resistance is the surface area. And since that the water resistance is a type of friction, so the surface area and the friction force have direct relation between them. It means that by increasing the surface area of the body that moves through water, water resistance increases. And by decreasing the surface area of the body that moves through water, the water resistance decreases. That's why the fish have streamlined shape. That's why fish have streamlined shape. Why do they have streamlined shape? Why do ships have streamlined shape? To decrease water resistance. And how can the water resistance be decreased? By decreasing the surface area, so the water resistance decrease, so their speed increase. And this is all of the information about the friction force. The friction force is a type of force exists between two surfaces when they touch each other, and it affects in the opposite direction of the movement, and it causes the object to slow down and stop. The types of friction are three types: friction between solid objects, friction between objects and water, and we call it water resistance, and friction between objects and air, we call it air resistance. The friction between solid objects is affected by three factors: surface area, type of the material surface, and the speed of the body. And there's a direct relation between the friction force and the surface area and the speed of the body. They have direct relation. By increasing surface area and speed, the friction force increases, and by decreasing surface area and speed, the friction force decreases. And about the type of the material, we said that the friction force increases between rough surfaces and decreases between smooth surfaces. The friction between solids and air, we called it air resistance, and we said that it's affected by two factors: the speed of the body and the surface area of the body. And both have direct relation between them and the air resistance. It means that by increasing speed and the surface area of the moving body, the air resistance increases, and by decreasing the speed and the surface area, the air resistance decreases. And we have here a life application that rockets, aircrafts, and trains are designed in streamlined shapes. Why? To decrease the surface area, so the air resistance decreases, so their speed increases. The friction between solid objects and water is called water resistance, and it's also affecting the opposite direction of the movement, and it's affected by two factors: the speed of the body and the body surface area, and both have direct relation between them and water resistance. It means that by increasing speed of the body and the body surface area, the water resistance increases, and by decreasing them, the water resistance decreases. So that's all for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay safe, stay home, goodbye.